On today's episode, we are thrilled to be joined by Mr. Jeromy Bryk. I hope that I got your name right.
Yeah.
Owner of Bryk Squad, barbell strength training and physique coaching, and a powerhouse in this world of strength training. As a four-time national record and world record holding powerlifter, a natural bodybuilder, and leader of the Bryk Squad, Jeremy embodies the mantra look good, lift heavy. His rigorous steroid free approach to lifting and his passion for technique and mindset have built a dedicated following online where he motivates others to embrace the grind. Get ready to learn from one of the best as we dive into his journey, training, and philosophy, and how he helps others unlock their strength potential. So, welcome, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you guys
Welcome.
for having me. Thank you. Excited to be on.
So let's get going. So the first question is, how did you get into powerlifting? How did you? I believe you started early on.
Yeah, so powerlifting, um, I guess I'll walk it all the way back. So I started lifting weights when I was 13 years old. So I got a really early head start. I was playing football. Um, I was a pretty skinny kid. So this was, yeah, I was probably about 130 pounds maybe. I just wanted to initially get stronger for football. you know. I didn't like the way I looked. I felt like I was getting pushed around a lot because I just wasn't as physical as I could have been. So my dad's like, go do push-ups, sit-ups, all that stuff. So I did that. Um, and I got into high school. I started to use the actual weight room for football training. I kind of realized I liked that more than I liked anything else. I liked being in the weight room. That was my thing, even way back then. I was like, okay, I think I like lifting weights more than I like playing other sports. And then I got into college and my athletic career and ended in high school. I didn't go play college sports or anything like that. Um, so I go to Cleveland State University up here in Cleveland. It's about 15 minutes from my house to pursue my degree in exercise science. During that time, I'm about 19 or 20 at this point. I started to get into bodybuilding a little bit. I started to realize like, okay, I need a competitive outlet because like I said, my athletic career ended at high school. So I missed having the locker room to go to. I missed having a game day to go to. I missed having like a why behind my training. I missed it more than I thought I would. Like, cause I got out of high school and when you're 18 years old, you're not thinking so much about the future. So I was like, I wasn't prepared for what it was going to feel like when I no longer had that to look forward to. But then to make a longer story short, I signed up for my first men's physique show in 2014. I was 20 years old. I ended up doing 3 shows that first year. But meanwhile, during that time, I'm still training heavy. I'm lifting like heavy, not like I'm talking power lifter heavy. I'm squatting heavy. Um, Immediately into that off season, so I did my last men's physique show in October 2014. That was my third show of the year. I was just turning 21 and I stumbled onto a program called Squat Every Day on bodybuilding.com by another one of my idols, Corey Gregory. In he was at the time he owned a company called Muscle Farm, but he was putting out on bodybuilding.com the Squat Every Day trainer. So I was like, that sounds right up my alley. Squat every single day for 7 days a week. A bunch of different it was like a conjugate method, West Side barbell style split with front squat, high bar squat, low bar squat, all one rep maxes. So I was like, that's cool. I do that for about 6 or 7 months initially, and then I decided I wanted to try powerlifting. Because I was like, I'm already doing the lifts. Let me try it out. So I did my first meet in 2015. In August of 2015, I had a 500-pound squat, a 325 bench, and then a 535-pound deadlift in my first meet. And then from that day on, I was hooked. Um, ended up doing 3 total meets that year. So it was like August, and then I did 2 meets in December. And then every year after that, I've done 2 to 3 powerlifting meets a year. mixed in with some bodybuilding shows. The sport's taken me a lot further than I initially planned it to. The biggest thing for me was to go back to, it gave me a game day. It gave me something to push forward towards every single day and have like an end date on the calendar, which took my training like mentality to another level because I was excited about something again. So I had a reason to be as structured and disciplined as I desired to be. Um, yeah, so as of right now, I've done over 25 competitive powerlifting meets, over a dozen natural bodybuilding shows, and I've really built the baseline of my training career off the back end of doing all that work, off of my competitive athletic career. So that's how I got started in the sport. And then, like I said, like at some point, I realized like I can make a business off of helping other people do this. That was my main thing. I was like, I really want to get good at this so I can turn back around and show other people they can be good at it. And that's what I do every single day.
Right, very interesting.
Yeah.
So, what are the key differences between powerlifting and your other strength sports?
Yeah. So powerlifting, you're the main key is like you're doing squat, bench, and deadlift. Other strength sports like Olympic lifting, there's the Olympic lift styles. There's clean and press, squats, and I'm missing one more. Um, but that may be it. Snatch, yeah, there's a snatch. So they're doing a little bit different things, and there's strongman. Strongman's all over the board with their events. They're a lot more like moving. They move a lot more, where powerlifting is just sort of static strength. Um, and then strongman has a bunch of different things. They lift the stones. They do the farmers carries. A lot more athletic, I guess. But then powerlifting is just squat, bench, deadlift for the best that you can
Uh,
get on all three, and that's your score at the end of the day.
have you tried the strongman?
I dabbled in it just a little bit. Um, it wasn't really for me. I respect everybody that does it. I thought it was too much moving, and it just didn't capture my attention the way powerlifting and bodybuilding do.
Mhm.
But it's fun. I like some of the events. I like the overhead pressing and all that stuff that they do. But yeah, I messed with it a little bit. I was gonna do a meet. It was the pandemic year, so there wasn't a whole lot of events going on. I was signed up for a strongman event and then it got canceled. And I was like, we'll just stay with powerlifting. you
So,
know,
out of the three, what is the hardest lift for you?
out of the three lifts, well, I would say it depends on the month, how things are going. But in general, bench press has always been my most challenging lift. Um, it didn't come as natural to me as the other two. Like I squatted 405 pounds as a sophomore in high school. So squatting always came pretty natural to me. Deadlifting, once I learned how to do it, came pretty natural to me. I hit 500 like the first year I took conventional deadlifting seriously. I went from like 365 to 500 within 8 months. So that came pretty natural. Bench press, on the other hand, I didn't hit a 225-pound bench till I was a sophomore in college. So I was never great at it naturally. Um, then it's kind of dogged me my whole powerlifting career in terms of like progress. The progress comes a little slower. Um, it's a very technical lift for as simple as it looks on paper. So I think there's that. My best progress in the bench has actually been the last 3 or 4 years when I started to really let my body grow. I started to like I started to be like, okay, I'm just gonna put on as much muscle as I possibly can and just be okay with being a little on the bigger side. And so like the bench went up with that. But in general, yeah, I've had to work twice as hard on bench press as I have the other two, for sure.
So, for those of you who are not aware, when you are performing in powerlifting, obviously you're not just training in those three exercises. You're training with a lot of other exercises to build up that strength, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say 90% of my training's other exercises. That's my dumbbell work, my machine work, the bodybuilding stuff that I'll use to build the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So yeah.
Yeah, you do share a lot of informative tips on X. I tried out your cross tricep extension where you are taking the pulley from. That was really effective. I've not seen it before from anyone. So a lot of
Yeah,
impressive stuff.
thank you. Yeah, it's one of my favorites for sure. It's a good one.
Yeah. So Kunal, you want to take it from here?
Right, Jeremy. So, how does nutrition play a role in all this?
Yeah, so nutrition's huge. For me, I've always adhered to a um pretty structured diet. I wouldn't call it strict. I have a lot of flexibility in my nutrition. Just because I'm really big on adherence. I'm really big on making sure that I'm hitting my macronutrients, my micronutrients to fuel my performance, but allow myself to still enjoy my life a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think especially in the realm of strength sports like powerlifting, everybody knows as a bodybuilder, dieting's like 90% of it. It's huge. And because to be able to look good on stage, you've got to obviously have everything down to the last gram as far as nutrition goes. But I think on the strength sports side of things, it's kind of now it's starting to become more relevant. People are starting to talk about nutrition for performance a little bit more. But back when I started powerlifting, that wasn't as popular. I think a lot of people thought powerlifting was for guys who were big, out of shape, and didn't know how to diet properly. And then if you look around the sport now, everybody's in really good shape. People are lean, people have a lot of muscle, and people are knowing how to manage their nutrition to be able to get the most out of their training. So I think for me, it's always been a big aspect of it. And that's one thing I really try to spread to my clients is like, yeah, you're a power lifter and you don't necessarily have to look like a bodybuilder, but if you try to eat like that, your performance in the gym is going to be so much better. And the people who really get it and latch onto that, they do see an improved recovery. They see improved performance. They like the way they look better. They're healthier, obviously, inside and out. So it's huge. It's huge, definitely.
And how does the mindset play a role in competitive sports like powerlifting? What kind of mindset really is good?
Yeah. So mindset wise, there's a lot that kind of goes into that. Um, I think the people that were growing up playing sports, they kind of naturally have a little bit of a competitive mindset. They always want to be either better than the next person or better than they were the previous day, which is awesome. Um, so I always say you've got to you got to be sort of a gamer. You got to be willing to show up when things really count and be able to keep a cool head when things really count. The one thing I really try to teach my clients, especially my competitive powerlifting and bodybuilding clients, you got to keep the middle ground. We don't want to get too caught up in the highs or too caught up in the lows because living in either of those things is going to make the opposite end feel that much more extreme. So for me, mindset like during training is always process oriented. It's making sure I'm not worried about the end goal necessarily. I know it's there. I know it exists, but my thing is day to day, how can I win today? How can I win today? And then tomorrow, whatever happened yesterday, I'm not worried about it anymore. I'm moving on. I'm worried about right now, executing right now. And then that compounds over time. And it also keeps you sane too, because the day-to-day process is where people get lost in the highs and lows because you might have one really good training session on Monday and then Tuesday you're getting nailed by a hard training session. Maybe you don't feel yourself, maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Sometimes your body just knows better and it's not going to let you lift the weight you're prescribed to lift. So you can't get caught up in that. You just be like, okay, I'm taking what my body can give me today and tomorrow I'll do better. Hopefully tomorrow will be better. Maybe I need to prepare better, hydrate, sleep more, whatever. Um, and that's the mindset during training. Competitive on game day or meet day, it's letting the confidence knowing you prepared 100% every single day and won every single day to the best of your ability and allow that confidence to take over in your performance. Because it's like I look at it as meet days, that's my time to show off my hard work. And if you feel like you genuinely did all the work, you left no stone unturned, you have every reason to be as confident as you possibly can. So, and then from there, it's like some people do better getting really pumped up and yelling, banging their head against the bar. Some people do better sitting in a corner with quiet music or just talking to their friends, keeping themselves calm. For me, it's a little bit of both. Um, I'm really a calm dude on meet day until I get under the bar. And then
Okay.
I just let whatever animal I got in me, I'll let it out that day. So, in that moment. But yeah, so training, it's like the process, having like a day-to-day process, go to work mentality, and then on meet day, it's like let's show off all the work we've done, and
Absolutely.
be as confident as you can possibly be and like seize the moment. That's the way that's the kind of like all-encompassing version of the mindset thing that I try to teach people.
Right. And is there a role of sort of calming yourself down by stretching, mobility exercises? That something,
Settle down like
uh,
on competition day.
or
Um,
in general,
yeah.
when you lift heavy, do you
Mhm.
also do a bit of mobility stretches?
Yeah.
Does that help a lot?
Oh yeah, definitely. Personally, I do mobility in the evenings, 2 to 3 nights a week. I could probably do more of it. I recently started seeing a chiropractor every couple weeks where I go in and get deep tissue work done, cupping, dry needling, all that stuff, and that definitely helps to get you into sort of a recovery state. Um, but for any lifter, I highly recommend, yeah, just like 5 to 10 minutes of daily mobility, where you're stretching your upper back, your shoulders, your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, just the really basic stuff. And that does a lot. Yeah, like you said, to just calm yourself down at the end of the day, get yourself into that like rest and digest state, so that way you can come back and hit it harder the next day. Yeah, 100%.
And someone who's starting off with strength training, maybe a young person or maybe someone who's in 40s and realizing that strength training is good for their health. What are
Mhm.
the what are the mistakes people initially make when they first time get into the gym and start lifting weights?
Yes, I think the biggest mistake is going in without a plan. Um, I see this a lot, like especially people, because people associate strength training with 1 rep maxes, and like we talked about, there's like processes and doing more than just going in and hitting the barbell every day. So I think the one of the biggest mistakes I see is like people who are like interested in learning how to squat, bench, and deadlift. They go in and just try to 1 rep max all the time, every single day, and they don't really have like a periodization plan. So, if you're a beginner, going in and trying to max out all the time will work a little while until it doesn't. And then you got to get sort of serious about mapping out your training, making sure you're hitting the right weights, doing sub maximal work to build the lifts instead of just testing all the time. So that's a big mistake I see. Um, Not taking the time to learn efficient form. I think that's something that comes with time, but you should at least invest some time into um, even the most minor form details. At the most surface level stuff, like on a squat, learning how to squeeze your shoulder blades together under the bar, flex your abs are great places to start. Bench press, learning how to hold a little bit of an arch in your upper back and stabilize the weight. Deadlift, learning how to not pull the bar with your arms like this. So keep your arms long, push with your legs. Really basic level stuff. I think that's a great place to start. But a lot of lifters, especially in the beginning, they don't even take the time to learn that. And then they end up being like, oh, deadlifts hurt me, or it hurts when I deadlift. Well, it's because you didn't take the time to put yourself in the right position to lift the most weight. You're just trying to lift the most weight no matter what, but you're not doing it efficiently because your body works on flows of energy. It works on leverages, have like biomechanics. So even the most baseline understanding is going to get you so much further, especially as a beginner, because you're going to stay healthier. The lifts are going to feel good. You're able to put more weight on the bar quicker, which helps morale, all those things. And then, of course, having a plan. Even if it's the most basic online strength template, it's a great place to start because you're building properly. You're periodizing your training. You're not just haphazardly going in and trying to max out all the time. because eventually we'll run into a wall. And if you can avoid that as a beginner, that's really good for you in the long term, because you're gonna love it more. You're gonna stick with it longer because you're gonna be seeing the progress more consistently. You're not gonna be feeling hurt all the time. And then who knows where you take it from there. But I think those are some of the big mistakes and kind of solutions too that people that I see a lot with people when they're starting out in strength training.
Right. And people get into injuries because of these things.
Yeah.
So if you get injured, that kind of puts you in a bad place because you're starting off and you're comparing yourself to maybe others. That's also a big mistake, right? When you start
Mhm.
off, you're comparing
Yeah.
yourself to someone who's been lifting for years.
Yeah.
So it's better to have a coach who can probably, guide you through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where mindset comes in too, like you mentioned, because part of the mindset is not comparing yourself to somebody who's been doing it for 10 years. You know, I mean, even at the highest level of strength sport or strength training, people have an issue with that. Um, I know it's a conversation I still have with myself daily. Is like, stop comparing yourself. Just have fun. Be better than you were yesterday. And I think that's somewhere like having a coach can really help. Because it kind of keeps it in perspective for you. I find myself a lot of times just trying to keep that perspective with my lifters. That's something I talk about with people every day, because they will get discouraged that they're not the top 1% in the world yet. But they do forget that like genetics play a role in that. Time under the bar puts a role in that. So you've been lifting for 5 years. The next guy that you're comparing yourself has been lifting for 15. Of course, it's going to be different, but you've also got a different background than he does, different genetics than he does. You are two completely different people. So comparing is like worthless. But if you get too caught in it, yeah, it's very bad it wreaks havoc on people's mentality. So
Absolutely.
I think having a coach like in that aspect is something that's really underrated, because we can look at it through a bigger picture and be like, yeah, but a year ago you were only doing this and now you're doing 200 pounds more than that. What are you not happy about? And then somebody usually goes, oh, that makes sense. But when we're in it and we're in our own head, we don't see it that way. So having a coach or a friend that can kind of talk you down and keep the perspective is super beneficial, especially early on, because you just don't have the miles and the wisdom yet to understand that. And so when lifters can navigate that side of things, the comparisons, the mentality, having be able to look at things through a bigger picture, they've got a greater chance for success. Because we all go through that. That's all a struggle, but it's how you navigate it that really counts. You know.
Right. And what qualities would you look for in a good coach?
So in a good coach, I look for someone that's obviously I don't think a good coach has to be the best in the world at what they do. It's an unpopular opinion, maybe, but I think they should definitely have some time in the game, some time invested. You know, maybe they've got an extensive competitive career, no matter how good or bad they've been at it. But the biggest thing I look for in a good coach is a good communicator, somebody who can look at things from, like I said, a bird's eye view, a big picture perspective, be able to work with different kind of personalities, because everybody's so different. Everybody's backgrounds are so different. The way everybody sees like the world is so different. Everybody's brains doesn't work the same. So a good coach is going to be able to adapt their coaching to the athlete or the lifter, and not just coach the system. Like one thing I heard from another powerlifting coach I really look up to is like coach the lifter, not the program. You know, so obviously, like as a coach myself, I've got some ideologies, some things that I use with a lot of people, stuff I know works, but occasionally I'll get thrown a curveball and somebody's going to come in and that just doesn't click for them. So I'll be able to go into my toolbox and find other methods to help them is super important. So I think a good coach has obviously great communication abilities, the ability to understand an athlete's mindset. And then, of course, there's the programmings, the methods, the endless ability to cue the same thing 15 different ways and always be able to dig deeper into their toolbox to help. Because, yeah, you are dealing with different personalities all the time and people with different abilities, strengths, weaknesses. So being able to be as flexible and adaptable to those things is super important. Anytime I see a coach being like really dogmatic, like that's not how we do things, that's not how I do things, my way is the best way, that's a red flag for me. Because I'm like, okay, you're gonna have a client come to you and your job is to help them. You have to help them and meet them where they're at, not where you're at. And your
Absolutely.
communication is going to have to be different. You're going to have to probably go deeper into your toolbox sometimes to find different things. Like maybe they're struggling with mobility, or something that other lifters don't deal with, or maybe a cue that you use with a lot of people that's not clicking for them. So you better hope you have another one available. And the last thing too, I think having a willingness to explain everything, even on the most basic level. I personally love it when athletes ask questions. If they want to know the why behind everything, I think that's great because it helps us build our relationship with them and it helps us educate, which is something I'm super passionate about. And I think if you're a good coach, you're passionate about that. But actually being able to know the why and be able to communicate it behind everything you do, should somebody ask, I think that's huge because it just shows your credibility, that shows your actual knowledge base and the wisdom that you've got in your years of experience.
Absolutely.
So, one question beginners often ask, I'm sure you get this a lot, like what kind of resistance training is best? Like they are confused between dumbbells and machines, whether free weight squats or Smith machines are better. Should I go
Yeah.
do an upper lower split? Should I do push pull legs? So these are like common beginner questions. So what is your advice for beginners?
So my advice is always for a beginner is a lot of trial and error. I think that's the best thing you can do is just not be afraid to try things. I'm not saying program hop necessarily, because I think a lot of people will do things for a week, decide they don't like it, and then go do something else. I don't think you should do that. But I think if you're a beginner, and I know what I really did, especially when I started to get into bodybuilding, is I would run a training split for a month or 2 months and decide if I liked it or not. And then I would do another one and I'd try it differently, see if I liked it or not. And then as soon as I started to stumble onto stuff that I knew worked, I kept the stuff I liked and threw out the stuff I didn't like. And then over time, the more you do that, the more different things you can expose yourself to, the more you can kind of create your own, you can kind of come to your own conclusion on these things. Because the answer is always it depends. It depends on what your goal is. If a machine's better than a dumbbell, is your goal to be, a better bodybuilder? Is your goal to be a better powerlifter? Is your goal just general fitness? Do you care about getting stronger on these lifts? What limitations do you have? What equipment is available to you? So those are all questions I ask. But in general, if you really have nowhere else to start, just try some things. Try some things out because everything works, but it only works as much as you're willing to buy in, and you're going to buy in when you enjoy something. When you stumble onto a program, whether it's one you created yourself or one you're working with a coach, maybe you resonate with their story a lot, so you can buy in more. Even if it's not the most optimal split, the most optimal training thing, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter much. It matters. I've seen a lot more people with less than optimal training get amazing results because they have great buy-in, because they genuinely love what they're doing. Even myself as an example, I blend the worlds of bodybuilding and powerlifting together. And a lot of circles on the internet are going to tell you shouldn't do that because you're not optimizing, right? But for me, it's optimal because I'm bought in. I fully believe it works. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the thrill of lifting heavy and I enjoy the thrill of getting a good pump. So when I blend them together, every day is exciting for me. So beginner, you need to be able to try things out so until you find that balance. Then once you find like, okay, that works for me, run with it. But it may take some trial and error to get there, and that's okay. There's no time is wasted when you're trying new things out, you're learning new things every day. There's no time wasted on that, because eventually down the line it'll all make sense to you based off your own experiences, and that's what matters.
So, in your opinion, like, what is the importance of cardio? Right? You hear a lot of talk about, at least in the Twitter circles, that deadlift is the only cardio you need. You don't need to do any serious cardio. So, what's your thoughts on this?
Cardio is super important. Um, I think I think I even fell into that trap years ago where, I was like, all I need is high reps. And like, no, not necessarily. No, like steady state cardio at least to keep your heart healthy. Your heart's a muscle and it's an organ. It's something you've got to keep good. You got to keep good care of, right? So I find cardio beneficial and from cardiovascular health standpoint, obviously, that you just can't get through just weight training alone. Um, it does help with recovery. I've found like if somebody does steady state cardio post weight training and they do that daily, they're having an easier time with their recovery because the blood's being delivered more efficiently, you know. So there's that aspect of it. Um, Obviously, from an appearance side of things, it's going to keep your body fat percentages down. It's going to help metabolically too, regulate your appetite and ultimately just provide more energy. So it's a huge component, even if it's on a pretty minimal level. I'm not saying people have to go run a 5K every day, but at minimum, I always recommend 15 to 30 minutes, at least 3 to 4 times a week of just steady state cardio, whether it's going for a walk at a brisk pace or hopping on on the treadmill and putting it on a slight incline and walking to get your heart rate up and, you know, um, break a sweat that way. That's at bare minimum. Some people want to get better at it and do more cardio, and that's good for them. But it should never not be a factor, though. I think anybody who says like, you don't need it. All I need to do is do high rep squats or do high rep set of deadlifts. Like it's not the same because that's not a sustained period of time with your heart elevated. That's what truly separates cardio from weight training. It's like the extended period of time because weight training is higher intensity, so your heart's up, but for a very brief period of time. But when you do like a low intensity steady state cardio, that's as long as you're doing that, you're at an elevated heart rate. So you're training your heart during that time, and you're getting some of that during weight training, but it's not enough to help like longevity wise and help on the inside enough. So to me, it's super important. And that's something I've taken a really hard stance on the last couple years, especially the more I've developed as a coach and as a lifter, is like I take my cardio very seriously. It's like brushing my teeth. You know, I do it every day because it's good for me, not because I love it, but because I know like in a couple years I'm gonna thank myself. I did it every day. You know, so and even for strength athletes, I think it's huge.
Right. So, since you touched upon longevity, since you mentioned longevity, so where do you draw the lines between performance and longevity? And the reason I'm asking is like recently, I saw an interview of Dave Batista. So
Mhm.
he was a huge monster in his WWE days. Now
Yeah.
he's downsized a bit, and the reason he's saying is he wants to be healthy and down like for longevity. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I tend to agree with that sort of philosophy. I think especially for a competitive bodybuilder, a competitive powerlifter, there's probably a limited window in time where you can be as big and as strong as you possibly can. Um, there's probably a limited window in time that you're really able to do that. And after that, they say the point of diminishing returns. At what point is that no longer sustainable for you, health wise? So I think, whether you're alternating seasons where you're a little bit bigger and then you take some time to downsize and just maintain for a little while, but you're not 100% pushing at that like biggest, strongest level all the time, because there does need to be a level of like he's saying, sustainability, longevity. And usually that falls somewhere between like that's somewhere that's below your peak levels, So I think like longevity for me is having short sustained peaks in performance and size, and then letting your average kind of fall to a place where you're comfortable, healthy, able to maintain your fitness very easily. And that's what like longevity is to me, because I do think at a point when you're redlining things, when you're really big to the point where you're having a harder time breathing. Maybe if you're a competitive pro bodybuilder, that makes sense for a very brief period of time, but it can't go on forever. So you need to manage the ups and downs of that properly. So you need to, come down in size for a little while, get to a place that's sustainable, stay there for as long as possible, then peak again. Or there comes a point in your life where you're like, that's just not worth it to me anymore. I just want to be healthy. And then you do downsize to a place like Dave did, where he looks really good. He's not as monstrous as he once was, but that's not his end game right now. His end game's to be healthy. I think he said somewhere he's doing movie roles too. So he wants to look more realistic, which I think that makes a lot of sense too, you know.
I guess it's more relevant for people on gear.
I would say for sure. I have no experience on that end of things, but I do think that the window's shorter for people who are on gear. A natural athlete in general, competing naturally is just straight up healthier. It's less complicated. It's more realistic. You can keep, because you're not pushing your body to limits it's not naturally willing to go to. That's the big like key differentiator. Obviously, there's smarter ways of doing it than others. A lot of guys, from what I understand, like if you're blasting for too long, you're taking the wrong doses. You're putting yourself in a pretty dangerous predicament. But that's very difficult as a natural athlete to get to that point. I feel like longevity and like being able to perform at a high level for a long period of time is more realistic as a natural guy. Because you even look around the world like right now, some prime examples, even in other sports. I'll start with powerlifting. So like somebody like Lane Norton, he's been competing at a very high level in powerlifting for something like 20 years. And he's still setting PRs, and he's in his mid 40s, but he's stayed drug free the entire time. He's had his injuries, and he's 44, 45 now, and he's still deadlifting in the 700s. A lot of the guys on like the untested side, they don't see that kind of longevity. And I think a lot of it has to do with they're pushing their body to an unnatural level sooner. So they're getting to that red line, that limit, and like what goes up must come down. Whereas a drug-free athlete, it's kind of goes like this. It's a lot slower. So your tendons, your ligaments, all that stuff's your organs, your internal organs, your heart, all that. It's keeping up all at the same pace instead of having like these spikes in performance that they just can't sustain. So I think that's like the biggest difference. In terms of longevity, yeah, it makes a lot more sense to me. That's why I've always stayed natural, because it's simpler, and it's just something I want to do forever. I don't want to have to get to a point where I can't do this anymore. That prospect's like terrifying to me. So yeah, I would say probably the window's shorter for somebody who's doing things like that. But if you want to have a really long window and do it forever, it makes sense to be either minimal on that end of things or not touching it at all.
Right.
You know?
So I'm pretty sure that you work with a lot of Indians or Asians in general.
Mhm.
So one common feature that you might see is that they are sort of skinny fat, where they are not visibly obese or something, but they have low muscle mass on their body.
Mhm.
So how do you approach such body types? Like, do you prioritize building muscle or you prioritize losing fat?
So for somebody that comes to me in that sort of condition, typically what I'll do is So it's kind of an interesting one because when you're like that skinny fat like body type, that's not the worst place to be in terms of progress because you can build muscle and like lose fat virtually at the same time in that sort of condition because your body's primed and ready for that, you know. But typically what I'll do is I'll lose fat first. The only difference is I don't go into an extreme deficit. I'll make it a very slow deficit, like a less steep one, something that they can keep their performance in the gym really high. And what that ends up doing is it's just enough to lose fat, but it's the calories are high enough to where they're still somewhat anabolic. So they're going to see lean muscle improvement because they're still able to train really hard. And they're seeing their performance continue to climb. And then over the time they're losing fat, but they're also starting to, harden up a little bit physically just through the hard weight training that they're able to do. That's generally my approach. So I'll get them lean first. And then if somebody decides that they want to like, okay, now I want to get serious about building muscle, they're in a leaner position to where we can actually start to go in and add calories now, build up the metabolism. Usually I'll like to, at that point, run a reverse diet where I'm adding calories in slowly, building up the metabolism, so that way over time, next time they diet down, they can diet at a higher calorie level. Because I think a lot of people in general, what I've noticed that are sort of skinny fat, their metabolic rate's a lot lower, whether it's because they're not moving, because they're not weight training. They may not be eating enough in general. So they sort of do see like a down regulation in their metabolic rate. So over time, it's important to take steps to improve that. Obviously that comes through weight training, building muscle, slowly adding in calories over time. It turn you into sort of a machine. So
Have you noticed any difference between, say, Asians and the Americans and the Europeans, like when it comes to body type and all that?
not necessarily based on that alone, but I just have noticed, I mean, there may be some cultural differences or like lifestyle differences that are a little bit different. But normally what I noticed is a lot of the people that are sort of generally, skinny fat, like we said, their lifestyles all look a lot the same. They're a lot more sedentary. They're not eating the right foods, not weight training. Um,
The reason I'm asking that is because we
yeah.
get this Asians don't have the genetics, Indians don't have the genetics is what I
Mhm.
I believe I believe it's a cope, but
I
whatever
do
it
too.
is, that's
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think it's more like a lifestyle thing than anything, and maybe through down the line somewhere, people started to believe that, and it's like, oh, I'm a certain, race, so I can't be big, I can't be muscular because somebody told them that, and somebody told the person who told them that, and so over time they started to believe that, and then obviously, if culturally or like lifestyle wise, they're living in ways that are perpetuating that belief, then that makes a lot of sense. But if anybody puts the time in and starts like making these changes, we see it all the time. Like you know, you can change. It depends how much. It depends how much, but like there's no reason that you can't see physical improvements. So I think like you said, like coping, yeah, that makes sense.
people like Hardy Chupan are doing fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look at him, Um, the man's made no excuses. He's the hardest worker in the room. Obviously, he's got in genetics, Obviously his genetics aren't bad. He's Mr. Olympia, So I think it's more of a lifestyle thing than anything because there are people, over here in the United States that are in the same predicaments. It's like, oh, I'm 35 now. I can't be ripped, or for one reason or another, somebody told them, oh, I'm tall, so I can't build a muscle, or I'm tall, so I can't be strong on the squat. Like you're just you're making a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. So, you know, for me, it's always kind of like when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, I challenge that mindset immediately. I'm like, well, let's find out. Let's find out how good you can be at this. We just got to stick with it long enough to see. So sometimes
Right.
sometimes it comes down to just challenging those beliefs, and then because I think that's a lot more to do with it than people would even realize.
So, when it comes to dealing with metabolic illnesses, diabetes, and all that, we use a lot of low carb, sometimes even carnivore, that sort of approach. So
Mhm.
there's been a trend lately of people taking up carnivore even for bodybuilding and powerlifting.
Mhm.
They sometimes people like Sean Baker and formerly people like Vince Gironda. Like so, there's been this trend. So what is your take on it? Like, what do you think? Like, is a low carb will go with bodybuilding?
So I think so. I kind of have an interesting answer on this, I guess. I think it comes down to buy-in, like a mental and emotional buy-in to whatever strategy you're using. I think that has a lot to do with it. So I noticed people like in like the carnivore low carb world, even the guys who are like, you remember back in the day when everybody did if it fits your macros, like those kind of things. Those approaches had really, I don't want to say like cult kind of like followings, but people really bought into what they were doing. And I think that has a lot to do with the results they were seeing. Because it's not necessarily that, and I'm sure that on a metabolic level, there's obviously differences. Like if somebody's, really obese and they go to a carnivore diet, they're going to see metabolic improvements. You know, that makes a lot of sense. But in generally for like bodybuilding, um, whatever you're fully believing in and fully executing is what you're going to see the best results with. And that goes for no matter what approach you do. Because I've done a lot of them. I've done intermittent fasting approaches. And at the time, I was really bought into it, really enjoyed it, and I got crazy results from it. Other times, I've gone with more macro based approaches where I'm getting as many carbs in as I can, hitting my numbers, trying to push my metabolism, and I've seen great results that way. But during those times, it was like what I was like believing in the most that was helping me. From a performance aspect, I think from a strength level, it's hard to say that if somebody who's not, going a zero carb approach or really low carb approach wouldn't benefit from some carbohydrates around training, simply because that's your body's preferred method of fuel. It's like, so if you do primarily eat low carb and then you throw 50 grams of carbs in around your training, I do think you would benefit from that, especially from you know, when you are eating low carb, like you become more insulin sensitive. So, you do throw the carbs and you see the difference a lot more substantially. So I'd have a hard time saying like not having them in is going to result in the same results performance wise as somebody who does throw a little bit of carbs in around training. That's where I draw the line as far as like what's beneficial and what's like you could get a little more out of this, you know. But if somebody feels better and they're seeing great results, who are we to say it doesn't work for that? The results are speaking for themselves. Then it just becomes a matter of, would you prefer to get more out of your training if you threw 50 grams of carbs in right before? Are you open to trying that? No? Okay, then continue on this path because your results are good. And then some people go, yeah, that would help a little bit. Let's see what happens. And then, they get the performance results, or maybe they don't. Um, Most likely, I'd say in most cases, carbs are like rocket fuel around training. So that makes a lot of sense. Even if they don't have a single carb the rest of the day, that's okay. But that's kind of my take on it. I think the buy-in, though, to go back to my original point, is the biggest thing. You can get results anytime you're really bought into something. If you're bought into it 100% and you're executing day to day, you're going to get great results.
Absolutely. So, Jeremy, can you talk about what are the quality carbs which you feel can be incorporated if someone wants to try carbs?
Yeah. So if you're doing carbs around training, it's like a timing thing for me. If it's pretty close to training, I usually go with something like fruit that's fast digesting. I usually recommend my clients who are, especially if they're coming in from like work or something like that, 30 minutes before, we do some fast digesting carbs like fruit, typically bananas, apples, bananas over apples due to the fiber content because the apples digest a little slower, but still, white rice is phenomenal right before training. Any rice really. I prefer jasmine or white myself. A little bit further out from training, like an hour and a half to that hour and a half to like 3 hour window, I go with more complex carbs, oatmeal, sweet potatoes, um, whole grain bread. Those sort of things that digest a little bit slower and keep energy sustained for a longer period of time are awesome in that 1.5 to 3 hour window before you train, and then you spike up again your carbs with a faster digesting carb right before you go in,
Right.
like 20 to 30 minutes before. That's generally the approach I've always followed, and it seems to work pretty well. So it's like really just like timing the sources is important in terms of like performance. But yeah, a mixture between simple and complex carbs is awesome.
Awesome. You did touch upon intermittent fasting,
Mhm.
right? So if someone who is in the obesity phase and wants to try intermittent fasting and do strength training and
Mhm.
is getting results, so do you think that method can work till the person gets to good metabolic health and then they can try carbs and everything?
Yeah, 100%. Um, I absolutely think it can, and I think it's more. I think a lot of times it ends up being a pretty sustainable method for people, you know, because it's easier to fast. I mean, in my experience, it was nice when I did that to have like that fasting window where, um, I think I did. How did I do mine? I did 16-8. That's how I did mine. So I did a 16-hour fast followed by 8 hour eating window. Um, That's kind of nice because if you can get through
Yeah.
that, you can eat the rest of the day, you know? It's a lot sometimes it's a lot easier for people than just going like the 5 meal a day route because you're hungry kind of all the time. So at least it felt like more filling during that eating window when I did it that way. From a performance aspect of it, I think it doesn't matter as much till you're a little further down the line. So you're into like a pretty high level of training or you're pretty lean. If you're in like that obesity phase or like just getting started phase, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference. If you train fasted, you may not be as strong, but maybe you train during your eating window. Maybe if your eating window begins at noon and it goes till 6 p.m. and you're able to get in a 4 o'clock workout or 2 o'clock workout, that's great.
Awesome.
You know? So yeah, I do think it works for sure. And that's in that respect.
I believe we have some audience questions which have come in. So
All
the
right.
first one is, can I do squats daily?
Yeah, you can. Um, it's so it depends on how you structure the programming. The squat every day program that I did, it was 7 days, but each day worked up to a daily max. You can read up on this more if you want to. Look up the Bulgarian method, or you can look up the squat every day program if you want. You'll see exactly how he laid it out. But when somebody squats daily, they're not doing like a traditional like 5 by 5. That'll run you into the ground. But if you work up to a different variation, so say you work up to a high bar squat on Monday to a training max, not a true 1 rep max. Then Tuesday, you do a front squat with a 3 second pause, say. And then Wednesday, you go back to a high bar, but with a 3 second pause and no belt. Thursday, you go front squat, 5 second pause, no belt. Friday, maybe you go low bar squat with a belt on. And you go as high as you can for a 1 rep that day. Again, a training max. And then Saturday and Sunday, at least the program that I did, we did 70% on those days. So there were recovery days, but you were still touching the bar and still working on form. So throughout the course of the week, it's not a ton of volume. And within a couple weeks, you'll start to feel pretty adapted to it. Um, I actually do personally recommend, for at least from like a skill perspective, and if you want to be like kind of extreme with your training, at least try something like that for 30 days and see what happens. Because if nothing else, you do get more confident under the lift. You do get more like technically sound. I know for me, when I did that program, I was never scared of squatting ever again. Because I tried every variation. I did it every day, even when I was tired, it was cold, raining, early, late. I did it every day. So it just became like walking to me. So even if you do it for 30 days, it's fun. It's a fun experiment to try on yourself. It's like definitely it's hard, it's challenging, it's unconventional, but doable 100%. Yeah. You just got to be kind of smart with the structure of it.
Right. And can the same be applied to push-ups as well, daily push-ups?
Yeah, so I think exercise. So the only exercise I think that wouldn't really work with this is like a deadlift, because it's just too neurologically taxing.
It
Push-ups,
is.
yes. Push-ups, pull-ups. I actually have a client right now that does pull-ups every day. And his back's grown significantly in the last 6 months. Because you are doing like sort of like feeder workouts, like they like to say. So if your goal is to get good at push-ups or good at pull-ups, dips, any of that stuff, if you do them daily, you do like a reasonable amount. I'm not saying do hundreds of them daily, but do like a reasonable amount every single day. You'll get better at them, and you'll look different. You'll start to look different too. You know, um, I did a bench press every day program too, and that works just as well because it's not too fatiguing. Push-ups aren't too fatiguing, pull-ups aren't too fatiguing, and there's like a big skill component to them too. So the more you do them, the better you get. Yeah.
Right. Another one, is it necessary to change exercises for any specific body part every 21 days? Or is it okay to continue just doing your favorite exercises?
I think it's okay to continue them. I've kind of changed my tune on this over the last couple years. Um, it depends on your personality type too. If you're able to stick with being bored for a long period of time and you're enjoying the workouts you're doing, you can run exercises as long as you want to. You can run them into the ground until you feel like it's time to change. Some people do better just mentally, like adherence wise, if they change them every 21 days, but there's no reason that you have to. Um, the only reasons you would change them is because you either feel like changing it, or you feel like there's an area of opportunity in a certain exercise that you may want to swap in. But no, scientifically, you can run exercise as long as you want to. A lot of the great bodybuilders, um, they had the same split all the time. They just maximized it. They got better either like reps or weight wise or performance wise every week, and they run them into the ground. Like I do bent over rows every week, and I probably won't change it anytime soon because they work. They're working for me. I'm still getting better at them. So it depends on, I think, your ability to tolerate boredom. If you get bored of a training, then maybe changing your split every month makes a lot of sense. But if you like what you're doing, keep doing it all the time. I have guys that do that for sure.
All right. So, just to add something like, I've noticed that me personally, maybe after 2 months, 3 months of doing a specific exercise, I sort of lose that mind muscle connection to a certain exercise. This usually happens with triceps and other parts like that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
then I have to switch up the exercise. It might feel like the best exercise ever, but maybe 2, 3 months down the line, I feel like it's not really happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree. I agree with that for sure. I also think like if you notice a point where you start to go backwards on an exercise you're doing, yeah, or like you said, you're not getting that connection with it anymore. That's a good time to just switch. You know, you switch to just maybe, I mean, if it's like a tricep press down, switch to a different attachment. That's enough to keep the needle moving, or switch the tempo of it, or if you're doing a machine, do a different machine, but it's the same movement pattern. That's enough to keep things. That's enough to keep the needle moving. But I fully agree with you. If you get to that point where you're just not connecting with it, that's a good time to change. Or if you feel like things are going backwards, like your performance week to week for a couple of weeks is not getting any better, but it's getting worse, then it's a good time to change exercises and give your body new stimulus.
So we have one last audience question. So his question is, what is the ideal time for gym? I don't know if he's asking what is the ideal time to start gym or whether how much time to spend in the gym. I think you can answer both.
Or is he asking what time of day should you go? I
No, I
wonder.
think he's asking like the duration you should spend in the
Yeah.
gym.
Yeah, I think that really depends. On like what level you can, what your realistic time commitment is. Personally, I don't like to go past 90 minutes, even on my biggest exercises, even on my biggest exercise days. Because I think like if you're doing like heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy bench presses, your workouts could take a little while because you do have to have longer rest periods between the high intensity sets. And then you still got to go do your accessories, you know. I don't think there's any reason you should be in there more than 90 minutes, 2 hours, unless you're like talking and stuff like that. Most workouts, even like if it's a 5 to 6 exercise workout, you can get done in about 50 minutes to an hour, realistically. If like you're in there and you're like not hanging around much, not chit-chatting with your friends, not on your phone too much between sets, you're adhering to your rest periods. So for me, I'd say like that 60 to 90 minute window is perfect, but it really just depends on like, it depends, if you're going to the gym for like to be social, you could be in there a long time, who knows? Um, and ideally though, like I like no more than 90 minutes.
So I think that answers the question, but still, just for clarity, like what is a good time to start going to the gym? Like, do our teenagers should teenagers hit the gym now?
I think as early as, yeah, I think as early as you can. There's studies out there that have proven that weight training in your early teens is a really good time to start. Because years ago, like when I started lifting weights, everybody thought it was going to stunt your growth if you started when you were 13. Now, they've since kind of proven that to be incorrect, and that's like a myth sort of thing. So I think like there's a lot of studies that say like 13 is like a really good time to start, like early teens, because you're able to play sports. At that point, you should be able to incorporate resistance training. So that's if you're that young, and that feels like something that you want to try out, 100%. Typically the younger the better, because you're taking advantage of that time where you're growing and you're keeping your body healthy and you're taking full advantage of like the easiest time in your life to grow. You know.
Right. So I think we have answered all the questions. So uh, Kunal, I think we can wind it up.
Yeah. So excellent information, Jeremy. Thank you so much for coming to our show and sharing such great insights with our audience. So uh, we want to just say that we'll be back again next week with another session with another guest. Till then, everyone, take care, stay healthy. Bye.
Thank you.